So my co-host today is Violeta Moreno-Lax. She's currently visiting professor at the Hertie School. She holds an ICREA chair at the University of Barcelona and is also full professor of law at Queen Mary University in London, where she served as inaugural director of the Centre for the Legal Study of Borders, Migration and Displacement since 2022. We're also joined by Grażyna Baranowska, who is Professor of Migration Law and Human Rights at the Friedrich Alexander Universität Erlangen-Nuremberg. And before that, she was a senior researcher at the Hertie School Centre for Fundamental Rights, leading a Marie Curie project entitled Miro on Missing Migrants, funded by the Marie Curie Action. And that was a project that I had the pleasure of being the supervisor for. We're also joined by another grantee, Minna Husseini, who was a Marie Curie Fellow at the Sutherland School of Law in Dublin from 2022 to 2024, where she led a project called COMFA Crisis, a project investigating EU competition law enforcement in the pharmaceutical sector, focusing on time periods before, during, and after the COVID-19 pandemic. And she was working under the mentorship of Professor Imelda Mar. And finally, Professor Lilian Surdi, who is Professor of EU Migration Law and Governance at the Faculty of Law in Maastricht University. And congratulations, Lilian, on your promotion, which I think takes effect in March. And she's also currently hiring postdocs for her ERC project, SOFT-N, which examines the soft enforcement of EU migration law. And she was also previously a Marie Curie grantee. So with that, I'll hand over to Violeta to set us up a little bit. As you've just heard, we are recording this webinar, and we hope to be able to share some really useful insights into crucial aspects of this grant and how to really go about applying for them. We're not going to be dealing with the technical questions around qualification and admissibility for the grant, but really a crucial aspect, which is how to go about approaching a potential supervisor. We'd ask you, as it's being recorded, to all keep your mics and your cameras off, please. And with that, I'll hand over to Violeta.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Catherine. And thank you all for joining us today, the speakers and the attendees. As you know, and as Catherine has mentioned, the purpose of the webinar is to share some ideas and some experiences in relation to the Marie Curie Postdoctoral Fellowships. Some of these ideas may also be relevant to other types of funded postdocs, like the Humboldt Fellowships that we are not going to be discussing today. The focus is squarely and fully on the Marie Curie action. And the idea is to support you as potential researchers in your career development plans through information on this flagship scheme of the European Union. As you know, this is a very competitive program with circa only 50% success rate, but we have a lot of expertise around the table today on how to make this happen. Research excellence is the key criterion to success, and this is what we're going to be focusing on. In terms of subject matter, the program is described as bottom-up, meaning that the researcher can and is expected to develop their own ideas. And central to success is also the training, the career development, and the mobility components offered by the host and your potential mentors. The poll this year is bound to open in April, so some of the things, the technicalities in particular, are bound to change. So please watch out, look at the website. We're going to be placing the link on the chat for everybody to see and have a look. The closing date for proposals is on the 10th of September, so there is a little bit of time for us to jointly prepare. And as I said, the many technical elements are for the webinars, including by national contact points, that we very much encourage you to attend, but this is not what we're going to be doing today. The official guidance on how to apply identifies 6 key steps to prepare your application. The first is to get familiar with how the funding program works. The second is to make sure that you meet the eligibility criteria and can indeed apply. The third is to find a host organization and a potential supervisor. The fourth is to start drafting your application together with your mentor. And the final point is to check your application with experts and gain feedback as much as you can. What we're going to be doing today is to focus precisely on points 3 and 4. So finding a host organization and a supervisor and start drafting your application. This is also known as the match. So this is what we're going to be trying to provide you insights with from the experts around the table. Successful projects require that the researcher identifies a potential host early and that they jointly with them co-develop the proposal. An element to success turns on the knowledge exchange between you as researchers and your potential mentors. And this is normally expected to be both scientific and career development related. So a final disclaimer for us today is that none of us has experience as evaluators in Marie Curie actions, but this shouldn't detract from a very interesting conversation. I give back the floor to Catherine, which is going to be introducing our speakers, and we'll have an opportunity to chat directly with them. Thank you. Catherine, back to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Violetta. So as you said, this idea of a match is crucial. And so that means the researcher, who can be anywhere in the world, has to reach out to a potential, what the actions describe as supervisor, though I often think mentor is a more accurate description, because usually the postdoctoral researchers applying for these grants are quite accomplished. So it's not like supervising a PhD, the researcher is devising their own project. So we wanted to demystify the first approach. And so with that in mind, I'm going to invite our two researchers who fairly recently held Marie Curie grants to tell us how they went about the approach and co-designing their research proposals. So maybe I'll start with Grażyna, as you were with us in Berlin at the Center for Fundamental Rights, and then afterwards turn to Mina. So over to you, Grażyna.
Thank you. Thank you, Catherine. And it's really exciting to be with all of those speakers and to have the full room. So I will be timing myself to not go over four minutes. And I have two main things I would like to share. So first, my first point is I would really like to encourage you to reach out to both people and institutions that you have not worked with yet. And secondly, think about how to strategically use that you put a lot of work into writing that application. So as for the first point, I reached out to the Hertie School, and Catherine was my supervisor, and it was really an amazing experience. And I'm sure I would not have the same experience by reaching out to an institution or a supervisor I had previously worked with. It also requires a bit of more courage because you have to write an email to a person you don't know. It's very easy. You write 2 paragraphs, you pitch your idea, you attach your CV, you attach one publication, and then you see what's happening. And if the idea is good and the person has time, then you're likely to get a positive answer or get in dialogue with. And the worst you can get is a no. But this only can happen if you really reach out to people ahead of time. So I guess I remember I sent my cold email back in February, and the deadline was in September. But kind of springtime is really the time, especially if you have not cooperated with a person, to find a host and to reach out. And that gives you a really unique learning experience. It also, I mean, the Marie Curie is made for getting something new. So really not only jumping on the work that you have done before, but adding new things. And by cooperating with someone new in a new place, you really have this new component as a natural thing in there. It's also an entirely new network you're dipping in. It's not only the new institution, but if you're as lucky as I am and you get a supervisor that's willing to share their network with you, it's really something that will expand much more than if you stay within the range of people that you've worked with before. So now moving on to the second big thing, it is a lot of work. So this is not only that you have to have an excellent research idea, but those Marie Curie applications, they are very, very specific. So there are particular questions that needs to be answered in this part, and then they need to relate to the other part. And there are numbers and some keywords you need to understand how to put together. So my advice would be to only write a Marie Curie if you're really willing to put your energy into doing that. without it, it's really not worth it. You need to have the time and the energy. And if you're a person that can devote 1 month, then you can do it in the end. If you're rather someone that needs to advise over a couple of months, then you slowly need to start. But that keeping in mind is also that it's really hard to get it. There's also some luck involved in that. Who gets reviewed it? Can you really convince the people? So what was important for me when I wrote it is to really have a plan B, kind of thinking, okay, this was a good use of my time because my idea was to apply again if I don't get it the first time. Then I had another grant scheme if I wouldn't get it a second time that I would apply with. And I also thought about how to use the network that I already made while applying. So I reached out to people that helped me write it and I kept in touch with them. So I made sure that the effort I put into writing the application will also help me and broaden my network and learn new things, even if I don't get the application. So I think to me, that was really like the strategic way about thinking about writing this application that was so much energy and time, helped me to stay sane and say, okay, this was really worth it. Even if I don't get it, it was really worth this whole effort that I put into it.
Thanks, Grażyna. That's really helpful. I think especially, we know it's a 15% success rate. So most people who apply, even with very, very strong proposals, are not successful. I think the scheme now gives these certificates of quality for very good but rejected applications. So that helps if you want to take the same project to maybe a national funder afterwards. But I really wanted to emphasize that fact that, you can write code. And if you have an interesting application, that, meant for us when we received it at the Center for Fundamental Rights, I was like, oh, this is really interesting. And to make it maybe just a little bit less mysterious, so Grażyna had a very good CV in terms of, you had published your doctorate, but it was in an area that I have no expertise, which is on enforced disappearances. So often the researcher bringing something additional, either substantively or methodologically, is also of advantage. So you don't necessarily want to have a perfect fit and be working in exactly the same field as the supervisor. In fact, something that fits into the overall center institutional context, that makes sense. But, also being able to say, well, I work in this field and the mentor works in this other field, and we're going to have knowledge exchange, two-way knowledge exchange. I think that can be really valuable for the application too. So Mina, over to you and how you made your first approach and got your project together.
First of all, thank you very much for inviting me. So I'd like to share my experience developing and implementing my project Crisis, which was about the enforcement of EU competition law in the pharmaceutical sector at UCD, Sutherland School of Law. So I came across Professor Meyer's work while writing my thesis on competition law institution in Iran. And her research on competition law institutional structure particularly was relevant to my work. But at that time, I had no idea about studying or working in Europe. So I had, after that, I had some teaching position in Iran. But in 2020, when we wanted to come to Ireland with my family, I emailed to Professor Meyer, introducing myself, attached my CV and a paper, and outlined a potential research topic. She was very responsive, very kind, suggested a Zoom meeting to discuss my ideas. And then our collaboration led to a proposal to a national grant. And then it was my first time writing like a European grant, first time working in Europe. So then it got rejected. But I received very constructive reviewers' comments. And with my mentor, we worked on the comments and on the application. And after that, we applied for a Marie Curie, and it was successful. And I can say that it wasn't my success. It was a collaborative work between me, my mentor, and also UCD research, UCD Law School research manager, because they helped me to shape this proposal. So it wasn't just me, because it was my first experience. And then my project was about EU competition law, as I said, and pharmaceutical sector. And then it was very timely because it emerged from a very big real world challenges, because it was during the COVID and we witnessed like unprecedented shift in how competition law applied during a global health crisis. So it was like one point that could be useful is use like real world challenges with real impact. So when I was developing my proposal, I followed along with my supervisor some different points. For example, first, I identify a critical gap, because when I was reading these literature, I realized that there are many literature on competition law or health crisis, but these connection between these two, intersection between competition law enforcement and a health crisis with a new approach, like a human rights access to medicine approach, it was the gap. So after finding the gap, with my supervisor, we designed this multidisciplinary nature, because for Marie Curie application, I guess this multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary nature of the proposal is really important. And also because, for example, my project was at the intersection of multiple fields: competition law, public health, IP law, patient rights, economic policy. So this approach helped to show the project's broader impact and relevance. It was also in line with EU priorities. It was a new EU pharmaceutical strategy in 2020. So I somehow worked with my supervisor to ensure this, to demonstrate this impact. And also my last point is that this synergy between you, your supervisor, and your host institution is just really important, because as mentioned by my colleague, this is really, it's beyond doing a project, it's about also you, because this fellowship is not just focusing on the project, is also the impact of the project on your future, your work, your career development is very important. So when I looking back on my fellowship, beyond the research output, I gained very great experience, invaluable experience in organizing events, participating, co-funding a research group, developing new skills like project management, like grant writing. And in your proposal, you should clearly outline these benefits, these opportunities for you. So I'm very happy to be here and happy to discuss more specific aspects of my experience during Q&A. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mina. And I think you really conveyed so well this idea that these grants are about the research, but also about career development and skill development. And you write that into the grant. And actually, as far as I understand from evaluators, that is often what distinguishes between the successful grants, that a very large proportion have very high marks on the quality of the research, but the bits related to dissemination and career development and skills development tend to vary, and sometimes people leave that bit of the application too late. And that's where I think, as you were mentioning too, institutional fit is so important, because if you find a host institution where there are things going on in your area and you can develop those further, or engage with them, and again, this mutual exchange, then you can really write an application that really makes sense in terms of skills development and institution building. So we might turn to the other side of the equation now and think about host institutions. I know, Lillian, you were offered a grant and you're now at a position in Maastricht where you would like to host Marie Curies, as is Violetta. So maybe both of you could just reflect briefly on, how, the question of fit and what host institutions can offer applicants for these grants.
Thank you. Shall I go ahead?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Okay, very nice to see everyone, see everyone. So I had 3 points I would be reinforcing in some of my remarks, things already mentioned in terms of fit with the mentor and the institution. The first point, and I come back to something that Catherine said with the scientific fit. So the fit, of course, you will be let's say you will identify a supervisor with, to an extent, common research interests, but because of this career development and scientific development element within the application, the fit is also how would your next work, envisaged work, possibly also fit with the specific supervisor. So don't search for perfect alignment with what you have been doing already. Think of what is the next step, and the next step should not just reproduce, let's say, the field of the doctorate. It should go beyond. So think what are, of course, there need to be also scientific contact points in terms of area, in terms of methodology, but it could also be that this is where you're going next. And this will also help you structure the part of the application that has to do with your training, which is not at all the technical bits. So I would say it's 50-50, if not even more important, to structure this career development elements. So both what you will get from the institution, but what you bring to the institution. So how you could complement existing expertise, help develop research in the institution. So I would say when thinking of this alignment, don't think of only your past work, but think also of your future work and where you are going, and where you are going should not be precisely where you were before, in order to make also this credible case of what this project will bring to your career, other than, let's say, 2 years of funding to do research. That's not enough. You need to have also a vision into how you will develop in terms of both scientific skills, contacts, methodologies, and also in terms of soft skills. So then in the training, you really need to also mention, I don't know, language elements, for example, that this new institution will bring, or to go through the program and to find very concretely project management skills that you will get in the other institutions. So see where you were and where you are going. So first, the fit with the mentor and the fit with the institution, and here this contacting early is very important. It's that you need to make a credible case also in how you fit and how you will develop research at the institution. So it's very important that you also make your choice, but you build the application by elaborating on, other than, of course, the mentor and the research groups that they may possibly be already having active in the institution, what other research groups there are more broadly in the university, what other centers your work would speak to. Are they also monodisciplinary, interdisciplinary centers, and how this would also develop you as a researcher? But in the other hand, what do you bring? Because the knowledge transfer is both ways. So it's not only that you passively, let's say, are developing and are gaining skills, but there is a distinct part of the application where you have to make a credible case. What do you bring in the institution? So there it will be important to also map existing expertise in the institution and to say, okay, how do I complement, how do I bring research forward in the institution? So you are meant to be a very dynamic and active actor that will also generate new research and collaborations. So then this is also something to start early and to be in communication both with the mentor and with the hosting institution to understand how does the research environment look like, where will you fit in and how you will develop it. And then the final element is the one of geography. So mobility is a requirement. We are not going to go into the technical aspects of this requirement, but it is a requirement within the grant. So you should also consider where you see yourselves being based and what is feasible also with personal and family life, because these are 2 years, so it's a grant of 2 years. You will get the most of it if you are also present for great parts of this fellowship within the host institution to undertake this training, to have these synergies happening. So then you should also put this within your consideration. So it is a considerable amount of time. So think also, where would I or could I be based in a way that is compatible also with my personal, family life, other aspirations, etc. Also, for those who may think of the global component, this is a combination where part is spent in Europe and then one has another host institution that is outside Europe. Then really think visibly, could I spend, I don't know, considerable amounts of time in the US, in Australia? How will this look in terms also of the practical aspects, family life, personal life, etc.? So do bring the entire, let's say, package in, so that you will also have a choice that will be sustainable and where you will be, it will be possible for you to flourish. So these would be the 3 points that I would highlight.
Great. Thanks so much, Lillian. That's really helpful to think about the host institution. And I think this also came across in Mina, what you were saying, that, you know, you have the mentor or supervisor and the researcher, but the institution really matters. And the research support staff in the institution are going to have a hand in the application too, because you'll be costing events or methods training or skills training, and that has to be done with the support of the host institution. So there's always a team of people then involved in going from the ideas into the actual practical reality of the application. So Violetta, any further insights you'd like to share from the host point of view?
Thank you, and I'll try to be brief because I see we're running slightly behind schedule. What I was thinking about in terms of the match, I was going to be thinking together about 5 big areas where I would welcome candidates to submit their ideas if they wanted to come and work with me, that address key contemporary challenges confronting human rights today. And I was thinking in particular of 5 potential fields. So migration and displacement would be one big of those fields where I have key expertise. But I would also welcome ideas and proposals that touch upon the climate crisis and implications for human rights. Also, ideas around war, security, and securitization, and again, how that confronts and touches upon and challenges fundamental rights. The impact of AI and new technologies, and values, authoritarianism, and democratic backsliding. So I think these are 5 fields where we're going to see the human rights debates of the day evolving, and that could potentially attract successful proposals. And in terms of what I would like to receive, is a short pitch, as our experts around the table have been mentioning today, with an indication of the research question that the candidate would like to develop, a brief very brief abstracts and perhaps a couple of lines about the methodology that you would intend to use, along with a short CV and a paragraph explaining your motivation for joining me in this adventure. And in terms of the 5 things that I would like to offer in exchange as a mentor, and that I think are going to touch upon and to develop parts of the application that have to come in. One is my experience in research design, project management, and effective project delivery that I would be very happy to put to work. The second is access to excellent research environments here at the CFR at Hertie, but also at the Border Centre, at Queen Mary University of London, and at the University of Barcelona. And with this, a vast academic network in Europe and worldwide, which would be quite useful when designing the mobility component in the application. The third point are key contacts in industry with law and policymakers and EU institutions and international organizations, as well as NGOs, and with practitioners, which might be, depending on the type of project, very handy if you intend, for instance, to engage in social legal work. The fourth point would be access to very exciting publishing projects in which I hope to involve Marie Curie Fellows, including the EU Law Encyclopedia of European Law, a research handbook on migration and human rights, and several works around solidarity, values, and human rights. And finally, I also have expertise in planning and delivering effective career development plans. I'm actually a very proud former supervisor of several early career researchers who have moved on to find permanent positions as lecturers or assistant professors at top universities in the US, in the UK, and elsewhere in Europe. And I'd be very happy to think around the key strengths and the needs of the candidate to try to put this to work in as effective a way as possible. So back to you, Catherine, and thanks again for the opportunity.
Great. Thanks so much, Violetta. So so this question of fit, I think we've tried to give a sense of it, and I think for researchers making an approach, I think we've gotten 2 very positive examples here where you write a well-crafted email with your CV attached and an idea, and it gets a positive response. I mean, I think the norm is probably somebody will say, this isn't quite a good fit, or I'm not currently looking to mentor someone, but if you choose well and write to several people, then hopefully you will generate some interest if you have a good idea. I echo a lot of what Violetta says in terms of my experience as a supervisor, and more generally, I think in relation to the Centre for Fundamental Rights. I think when we sat down with the inaugural director, Professor Bashak Challa, and the team, and I know some of them are on the watching the webinar, we really thought through this question of career development, because we were a centre in a relatively small school, so there was no further employment to be had at the Hertie School for the most of the applicants. And so thinking through a career development approach for people and trying to put resources into mentoring was something that we took seriously and that had been successful in the past years. So I think, but then, it's a competitive employment market out there, so nobody can guarantee you further success, but the Marie Curie grant in and of itself is really, such a prestigious award that it puts people in a very good position. So with that, we have time to sort of open up, and I'm just going to look at the questions and see. Some of them are very detailed questions about which type of grant has the highest level of success, and I don't think we're well placed to answer that. And again, the historical experience probably isn't a good predictor because these things vary. I mean, there's one question, for example, about global fellowships and whether they're easier to get. I don't know if there's any evidence of that. I mean, I think if it fits your research, it's a wonderful idea, and it means you have a longer project potentially. So the 2 years is for the European fellowships, and the global ones can have additional time spent outside of Europe. And additionally, I know from webinars that I've watched, the idea of a placement in a civil society organization or an international organization can be added in, but that's something that not that many applicants choose to do. And I know the EU is keen to include that. One of the questions in relation, maybe this is a question for potential mentors, was should the supervisor help with methodology? I mean, in my view, I don't think there's very much of a should in relation to this. I mean, it's very much a collaborative process. So some supervisors may have guidance to offer the applicant on methodological issues. And some people may think about methods training as something that they want to build into their project, but ultimately the application is the applicant's. So I don't think you can prescribe to a supervisor, you must help the person with their methods section. I think it would be very strange not to discuss methods and not to discuss methods and career development with somebody. So if you've maybe done a very doctrinal PhD and you're moving into more interdisciplinary terrain, then you would immediately, I would imagine, as a supervisor, talk about, well, where are you going to get that methods training? And is that something we provide, or do we budget for you going elsewhere to get that methods training? I don't know if anybody else wanted to pick up that methods question from the chat. We also had a question about interdisciplinarity. I don't know if anybody wants to pick that up. One of the other questions which might relate is, would you accept proposals that do not fit within law as a discipline? I'm thinking of sociology of human rights, for an example. I might open that up to the other potential supervisors, and I'm happy to answer it after that as well. So Lillian or Violetta, did you want to pick up that one about interdisciplinarity?
Yes, and I think I can combine it also with the question of how far one should go from their PhD. So unlike other schemes where you need to prove to an extent that you have past experience in what you are proposing, this is really an opportunity to go beyond, also methodologically, what you have already acquired. So I would say one can be relatively bold, and actually this would make a very credible case for the training and for why this particular research line is necessary. And they can say how they can relate to what they have done, of course, before, but also extend their expertise through training that they have not acquired or that they promise to acquire before they start implementing the grant. And that's why they can implement this specific research line. This is the case in other, for example, funding bodies. Here, one can really make the case and also take the time to say, this is where my research is going next. For example, I was, before my PhD, was mainly implementing legal methods and legal analysis. I want to open up to interdisciplinarity. And this will be possible because during the entire first year, I am going to follow these courses at the university, these specialized trainings. And only after 1 year, I will be able to start, let's say, implementing these methods in my work. So this is also where the opportunity lies. This is why this research line was, what this research funding was made for, to help you make a jump, both in terms of, yes, prestige, career development in the sense of having a grant managing it, but also of opening the horizon of saying, I acquired new methodological skills, I applied them, and now I'm far beyond where I was when I was finishing the PhD. On the personal level, I myself conduct interdisciplinary work at the intersection of law and public policy, so qualitative, not quantitative work. And I would be also very open in any my ongoing ERC, where there will be another team is also going to be undertaking empirical qualitative work. So I would be open to both more legal analysis, more traditional approaches, and to interdisciplinary work of the qualitative variety. And I have experience in this. So then I think that also looking into the thinking of other potential mentors, looking into the portfolio, the type of projects maybe that they are active on, the type of publications, you can have an indication on openness into interdisciplinarities also beyond this group.
Thanks for that, Lillian. Violetta, did you have anything to add on the methods and interdisciplinarity side, or if not, yeah.
Very quickly, just I think interdisciplinarity and breaking away in part from past research can be actually a very credible space where the synergies between the mentor and the candidate can emerge, and a true space for collaboration and added value can be generated. I guess the key idea would be to credibly embed this within the proposal, be it via the training component, a concrete set of deliverables that do demonstrate that this interdisciplinarity is a key element of the proposal, and then perhaps strategically using the mobility component to expand horizons. So if you're coming to an institution which is, say, law-based, but you're saying, I am a sociologist and I want to undertake interdisciplinary research, perhaps the mobility component can be at another institution that can offer further training and further insights into the other part of the methodological scheme that you are trying to develop in the proposal. So I would be strategic in how to devise the project as a whole in that regard.
Yeah, I think it is the question of fit again, because I mean, I work in a law school, but it's a law school that's had, I think, if we total them up, 7 ERC grants, and they're all very much in law and space, like law and different theoretical approaches, different empirical approaches to studying law. But so it's still people studying law, but through very different disciplinary toolkits. So I think it is about finding the right fit on that question. I also think you can have a very methodologically sophisticated doctrinal legal project. So sometimes people think if it's going to be sophisticated or move up a level, that I have to move away from legal doctrine. And that might be the case, but I don't think it's always the case. And so I'd want to reiterate that as well. And Gražina, you've had your hand up. Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to touch upon both methods and interdisciplinarity. And when I reached out with my project to Catherine, I had almost only experience with doctrinal work. And it was really us being in dialogue and thinking, not making it using other methods, but thinking about what would help me to respond to my question that I asked in that field. And it was exactly the interdisciplinary, not only of Catherine's work, but that was at the center of fundamental rights and that I could use at the Hertie School that helped me shape it up in a way that was helpful. So I think that's really the core. And whereas with methods, I was very keen on, and I'm still keen on learning new methods and engaging. A bit less so with interdisciplinarity. And here I did not push myself a lot. You have to have something in the text. So I explained how my research is informed by other disciplines, but it's not that you necessarily need to do very interdisciplinary work. And I think that's just next to the doctrinal, that if you're really excited about doctrinal work and you have a good idea, then maybe that's also a good way to continue that. But I think a lot of people, when they think about Marie Curie, they think they need to do interdisciplinary, whereas if you don't explain it well in the application, it's not an asset. So it's only an asset if you can show that it responds to a question, that it's useful for your career, for your development, and not for itself. So I've seen a number of reviews where that has been assessed negatively also by reviewers. So I think the core with methods and disciplinarity is to think about how you want to develop, where you see yourself, what kind of research questions you want to respond to, and less about showing that you're this exciting interdisciplinary person using a lot of methods.
Great. Thank you for that. We have a few more questions, so I might just try to summarize them because we have about 10 minutes remaining. On the question of finding a supervisor, somebody has asked, how far should I go away from my network? Would asking an external examiner be too close? I don't think we were being prescriptive about that. We were just suggesting, you don't have to go for somebody who is exactly in the field of your PhD, because of this idea that Marie Curies are about fomenting new exchange of ideas, that going a little bit further away can be useful. But Mina, it sounds like you and Professor Marr had a very good substantive fit, even though you were traveling a very long distance from Iran to Ireland. Whereas in other examples, I've seen webinars where somebody whose background is in development economics is going to work in a microeconomics lab because she's trying to develop a project at the intersection of those fields. So I think this is really what the bottom up means. Like, it has to be driven by the research. So I wouldn't be too prescriptive about this, like how far or how close the supervisor is. It just is a question of fit, I think. And then we had a couple of questions about seniority and how many publications you need. Lillian, I recall having that conversation with you and some data that you had about, at what stage people typically get these grants, but you wouldn't want to overgeneralize either about that. But
no, and also the scheme made some years ago itself a conscious decision to limit the seniority for this grant. So just to say that in the past it was open seniority. So sometimes one heard also of extremely senior and established professors 25, 30 years after their PhD, securing a Marie Curie and actually using it as a kind of sabbatical. And I think that at some point it was considered that this was going quite far from the initial, let's say, reasoning behind this scheme. So then some years ago, there was the conscious decision to limit, actually, in the other sense, to cap the seniority, which is 8 years from the award with a number of exceptions. We will not go into these technical elements, but just to have in mind that there is now a distinct focus on the earlier sides of their career, and it is not open to very senior colleagues. So in this sense, I believe that this changes a bit, this shifts the balance in terms of awards, because when capping the grant, there is a certain level, let's say, of seniority or advancement, which is considered relevant. And that is clearly in the earlier stages. So I wouldn't say that one needs to present an extremely, let's say, at this point, accomplished CV, and that those who are in their earlier, very early stages, like PhD plus 1 or 2 years, should be prohibited from applying. This turn in the eligibility requirement actually brought the grant back to its roots. And one can make a more credible case that they are going to develop not only as a scientist, but also professionally when they are at their earlier stages. So I would even say that this completely reversed, let's say, the paradigm.
Yeah, thanks for that, Lillian. That's really clear and helpful. And then we had one final question about the seniority of the supervisor. And again, I think in terms of formal eligibility, it can be somebody at any level once they have some sort of tenured position that they can offer the mentorship for the duration of the project. But again, I don't know of the data on in practice where seniority lies, but I would think you want somebody at the right research stage who has the energy to put into co-developing the project and actually mentoring you through the process. And so that may be somebody who's at a very advanced career stage, or it may be somebody who's sort of more mid-career or even early career if you feel like there's a really good fit. I don't know if any of the panelists have any observations from that point of view.
I just wanted to add, it will probably not be about the formal title that the mentor holds, because there is variation across different countries and jurisdictions. It would probably be about the match, right? So this magic word that we've been using throughout the seminar today, it's really about having a good idea that you flesh out together, and how the joint work between the mentor and the candidate can flourish in the best way possible. So it's more about the substance rather than the packaging, if that can use those words.
Yeah, I think those are very wise words. I wonder, does anybody on our panel want to pick up any of the other questions or offer a final comment or suggestion or nugget of wisdom that they'd like to share to the audience? Mina, please. Yeah.
Just for the last point, pay attention to the big picture of your project. Like details are very important, but I guess make sure you answer these questions like why does this research matter? Who will benefit from it? And how will it contribute to both academia, industry, society? And in my case, it was one of the reviewers' comments in my rejected proposal that I revised it in the Marie Curie, and was one of the positive points of the successful proposal. I make sure to connect this research with larger societal challenges in public health and patient rights and economic policy. And it was they're not just assessing your research or your methodology. I guess they're looking for a project that can make a meaningful impact. So it was my last point about my project.
That's great. I think that's a really wonderful note on which to start to conclude. I'll just say some kind of concluding thoughts on the webinar, and then I'll hand over to Violetta to formally wrap it up. As somebody who's had a wonderful experience supervising Grażyna's project, I mean, I'm really keen to do this again with exciting projects. And really, I think of the field as something there. I'd want to read a proposal that makes me go, yeah, like that's something we aren't looking at enough. And as Mina says, then connecting it, like why should EU taxpayers' money go to give you a research job for several years? Yes, it's going to advance an individual's career, but you have to also think about the contribution to understanding and scholarship and society more generally. So I think these are wonderful grants, especially that career development sort of element to them. I think it's a really, really interesting and important program from that point of view. And personally, I'd want to encourage applications from, if you have an idea and passion for that idea, that's really a starting point. And then, if you find the right mentor, you can develop that together. And although we've had, I think appropriately given this is Marie Curie, obviously a woman-heavy panel, I think, applications are welcome from people of all genders. And so with that, I'll hand over to Violetta to do the formal wrapping up.
Thank you, Catherine, and thank you everyone for giving their time. Thank you in particular to you for instigating, also to Dr. Michal Kramer, manager of the Center for Fundamental Rights here at Hertie, and to Rada Kalina and the rest of the CFR team for their support. As mentioned, we have recorded this webinar today on Tuesday, the 18th of February, 2025. The recording will be available soon through the CFR website for further viewing. The 2025 call for Marie Curie proposals will open in April, and it will close on the 10th of September 2025. So there is time, but time is already pressing. There are many other official webinars, we've mentioned this, including through the national contact points on the very technical aspects, some of which you have been asking about on the chat, although we weren't able to pick them all. Do please look out for this National Contact Points official webinars, because they are going to provide answers to these very technical issues. If you would like to find more information about the CFR, please sign up for updates via Blue Sky, LinkedIn, and the mailing list. I'm going to put here the link to the website of the CFR for further information. There you go, it's on the chat. If you are considering applying for a Marie Curie postdoc, the main takeaway from today is to approach a potential mentor early, to identify potential mentors based on the research and the potential for a match with you and your research plans, but also taking into account the mobility requirement, the requirement to demonstrate knowledge exchange, and the potential for career development. Thank you very much, everyone, and looking forward to the next opportunity to meet you all.